Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unlocking a really fascinating 2,000-year-old vision and connecting it to the battlefield tactics of the Roman army. This is where ancient prophecy gets tangled up with some serious military history. So, it all kicks off with this incredibly powerful and kind of cryptic image. Four angels, right, at the corners of the world, and they're physically holding back these destructive winds. But here's the thing, they're on a tight schedule. The destruction is paused for one very specific reason, to seal God's servants.
So you gotta ask, right? What exactly are these winds? And what in the world does it mean to be sealed? Is this whole thing just symbolic, or is it pointing to something that actually happened? To answer that, we need to wind the clock way, way back.
All right, let's go back to 66 AD, to the Roman province of Judea. Tensions between the Romans and the Jews are at an absolute breaking point. The whole region is basically a powder keg just waiting for a spark. And that spark wasn't just one event, it was a whole chain reaction. First in Caesarea, a religious clash gets things going. Then in Jerusalem, the Roman procurator, a guy named Gessius Florus, decides to just seize a bunch of silver from the temple. When people protest, his response is unbelievably brutal. Raids, whippings, even crucifixions. And that was it. That was the last straw. Judean nationalists just rose up, overwhelmed the Roman garrison, and literally threw them out of the city. So the rebels scored this huge victory, right? And this is a big but, in doing so, they had basically just poked the biggest, baddest bear on the planet. A full-scale Roman invasion wasn't just possible anymore. It was inevitable. And you bet, Rome didn't just sit on its hands. The first response came, and it came fast. The legate of Syria, a general named Cestius Gallus, marched his army south to just stamp out this revolt once and for all. So he gets to Jerusalem with incredible speed, surrounds the city, and the rebellion is totally cornered. Victory is literally right there for the taking. And then he does something that makes absolutely no sense to anyone. For no military reason whatsoever, he orders a full retreat. You know, to this day, historians are just scratching their heads about this one. The Benson commentary, looking back at the records, calls the decision totally unadvised. The historian Josephus even theorized that maybe God himself just didn't want the war to end. Not yet, anyway. And this wasn't just a small mistake. It was a complete disaster. As the Romans were retreating, Jewish rebels ambushed them, killing nearly 6,000 soldiers. A total catastrophe for the Roman army. Okay, so here's where things get really interesting. This completely bizarre retreat created two totally different reactions. For the Jewish zealots, the hardcore nationalists, it was a miracle. It was proof that God was on their side. But for others, especially the early Christians living in the city, it was a different kind of sign altogether. They saw this strange, unexplainable peace as the perfect window of opportunity to get out before the real storm arrived. This was their moment, the prophetic holding of the winds. So that brief pause, that holding of the winds, well, it was over. The very next year, a furious Emperor Nero sent in his top general, Vespasian, to end this rebellion for good. The temporary peace was gone. The winds were about to be unleashed. And this is where that vision of the four angels starts to click into place with actual history. It's wild. Vespasian didn't just bring one army. He called in legions from all over the empire. And they all converged on Judea from the four corners of the world. You have legions marching from Syria in the east, from modern-day Serbia and Turkey in the north, from Hungary in the west, and they're all backed up by troops from the south. The four winds were officially blowing. So, this massive army coming from all directions, these were the four winds of destruction. The very same winds the prophecy said the angels were holding back, just long enough for those who knew the signs to get away. Now, they were unleashed to hurt the earth and the sea. Okay, so we've talked about the winds, but what about the other part of that prophecy? What does it actually mean for the servants of God to be sealed in their foreheads before the storm hit? Well, it wasn't some kind of physical mark, like a brand. Think of it more as a spiritual thing, a mark of allegiance that came with divine protection. It meant that you were recognized by God, and that a way to safety would be provided for you before everything went down. And you know what's fascinating is that the book of Revelation actually talks about two kinds of sealing. It's like two paths leading to two completely different destinies. One group is sealed to the Lord by doing what's right and paying attention to warnings. The other is sealed to Satan through wickedness. One is marked to be saved, and the other marked for destruction. And this is absolutely crucial. This wasn't just some random event. Years before any of this happened, Christ had given his followers a super specific, observable sign to look for. The trigger to run for the hills was clear. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, it's time to go. So let's just connect all the dots here, because the sequence is amazing. First, the warning was given, then the sign appeared. That's when Cestius Gallus surrounded the city. The reprieve, the holding of the winds, was his baffling retreat. The sealing was the act of obedience from the Christians who saw the sign and fled, and only after they were safe were the real winds of destruction under Vespasian let loose. I mean, when you lay the historical timeline of this war right next to the prophecy of the four winds, the parallels are they're really striking. A bizarre military retreat becomes a divine pause. The arrival of 4 legions from the corners of the empire becomes a prophetic storm. It really suggests that some of these dramatic visions in Revelation might be deeply rooted in actual historical events. Which leaves us with a pretty big question. Are we just looking at a series of incredible coincidences or a profound intersection of history and prophecy?